April, we have hosted fascinating personalities from a wide range of backgrounds, featuring business, political, and spiritual leaders. These chats are informal, revealing, and inspirational. These chats are available via Facebook Live and are subsequently made available also on YouTube. And please share any questions or get on the comments, and we'll try to incorporate as many as possible. It is our privilege and an honor to have with us a fascinating guest all the way from Paris, Monsieur Maurice Lèvy, who is chairman of the supervisory board of Publicis Groupe, the world's third largest advertising and communications group. Founded in 1926, Publicis Groupe counts today, I believe, over 80,000 employees and is present in over 100 countries around the world. Maurice became chairman of Publicis, the founding agency of the group, in 1984, and was later named CEO in 1987. He has been honored with numerous distinctions over the years for his contributions to media, business leadership, and tolerance. Mr. Lèvy, again, it's an honor and a privilege to have you with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and it's a privilege to be with you. So I hope that it will be working quite well for your viewers.
I hope so too, I'm sure. We've heard a lot of good things about you, and I think over the course of this evening, we're just, I'm going to try and facilitate for people to get to know you better. So a good place to start is from the beginning. And I believe you were born in Morocco in 1942 and educated there, a little bit in the US and the United States of America. You've mentioned that your rootless, I think that's what you called it, upbringing means you feel at home everywhere. Please tell us a little about your childhood and your upbringing.
Oh, there is not much to say. You know, it's first, it's long time ago. I don't know how many centuries ago, and it's a story that many Jews have experienced, because originally my family was from Spain. They immigrated to first Italy in 1492 due to the Inquisition, a story which is well known for all the Sephardic Jews, and then from Italy to Salonika. And they were there until 1830, where they have, after lengthy negotiation, which I understand took something like 20 years, they went back to Spain with the ambition of restoring, rehabilitating some Jewish old properties, including the old synagogue of Cordoba. And we could have lived here for a long time, but my father decided to get involved in politics and fighting against Franco, which was not allowed based on the agreement that my family had with the Spanish authorities. And therefore, not only couldn't go back to Spain because of this, but he has been repudiated by the family. And after the war, he reestablished himself in the south of France, where my mother joined him with, they already had two kids, two sons, and my sister was born in France, and I was born in Morocco because there was something which was called the World War II, and the German was putting some pressure to the south of France, and they had to escape. They couldn't go north, they couldn't go to Spain. The only place they could go was to cross the Mediterranean Sea and to land in Morocco. And where I must say, and that is extremely important, the King of Morocco was protecting the Jews, including against the French authority of Vichy. So this is the beginning of the story, and then there has been the usual transfer. After a few years in Morocco, went back to France. I grew up, went to do some studies. I wanted to be a surgeon. I have a problem with the blood and with the wounded people, so it's a bit difficult to be a surgeon when you cannot stand the blood. And I had to do something else, and this is how I went to the US, and I learned what was a new industry at that time, which was IT. And I became an engineer in IT, and I went back to France, and looking for a job, I found a job in an ad agency running their IT system. That's the story. Well, it's simple.
It's simple and not as straight, but it's not as straight. It is straight and not straight.
It's quite common with the Jews. There are some Jews who have been established for 100 years in the same place and grew up in the same place, etc. But this is a very small minority. Most of the Jews have traveled, either because there was some pogroms or because there was some other issues, and I think it was quite common to travel and to change places. What I don't know is what will be the future of my sons. For the time being, everything is fine, and they are all living in Europe, but who knows what may happen tomorrow.
Who knows? Yes, as you said, it's never a straight journey. I believe it's when the Jews left Egypt on their way to the Promised Land. It was 42.
I was not there yet.
So anyway, it's never. But here you are today. You know, talking about your childhood and background and who you are today in terms of the great success that you've had. Obviously, people have strong influences in their lives. Who are the greatest influences, would you say, in your life, generally speaking? So if there's a world and a life outside of business. And then the question is, who is the greatest influence on your life in the world of business? We can start.
I have been extremely fortunate because there are a lot of great people who have been an inspiration to me, starting with obviously my parents, but more importantly, more importantly, I should not say more importantly, because normally there is nobody more important than the father and the mother, particularly when you are born in a decent Jewish family. But my grandfather has been extremely important, particularly when it was coming to lesson of life, philosophy, teaching me the basic things that make you a decent man, the values, the virtues that you may have and you must have. And it has been extremely important to me. Down the road, I have had a few professors who have influenced me a lot. And later on, the founder of Publicis, Marcel Bustin-Blanchet, has been my mentor in the advertising world, and he has been not only inspirational, but he was really a fantastic man, sharing not only his vision of the advertising world and what it could bring with, but also some lesson of life and what you can learn from his experience. And his experience was extremely rich as an entrepreneur, as a Frenchman, as a resistant, as a Jew, as an admin, and he was really inspirational. I was spending a lot of time with him, trying to learn from him. And I have had a few other great friends who have been fantastic to me, and I had a great admiration for them. And funny enough, unfortunately for me, I knew them when they were, I wouldn't say at their beginning, but they were already known, already in a good standing of business or institution or as writers, but they were not yet where the destiny put them. I could mention, obviously, Shimon Peres has been a great friend since the mid-70s, and he was absolutely extraordinary. And we were very good friends till the end of his life. And he was a mentor. He was somebody who was always taking the time to explain and to share and to spend time. I don't know how many lunches, how many dinners, how many meetings we had, and it was always extraordinary. The other one I would like to mention is Elie Wiesel, who was a grand friend, also since the mid-70s. But by chance, we have been in the same debate, and we were speaking together. I think that there has been a mistake by inviting me alongside Elie Wiesel, and we had a very good chemistry and understanding. I had already a great admiration for the man, for the writer, for the thinker. And since that moment until the end, I must say that he was an impressive man, somebody I really loved. There is also some politicians and some other institutional people who have been important in my life. The list is very long, and I will stop here, and if need be, I will mention maybe down the road one or two names. But these are the people, my grandfather, Elie Wiesel, Shimon Peres, are the people who have really, and Marcel Bestin-Blanchet, obviously, the founder of Publicis, put their fingerprint on me and have probably shaped part of, if not my education, at least the corpus of values and the way I'm dealing with some important life issues.
Well, that is fascinating, and you are certainly privileged and maybe even lucky to have met and spent so much time with these. These are some of the most remarkable people of the previous or recent generation. As a matter of fact, we interviewed both Elie Wiesel's son, just a few weeks ago, who spoke about his father, and we're going to be interviewing Jaime Peres too. But let me zoom in a little, and you mentioned your grandfather in particular focus. Is there anything specific that you can say about your grandfather in terms of a trait, or maybe something specific bit of advice that made a strong impression on you?
My family from this side, from the side of the grandfather, side of my mother, was a family which was relatively well off, and my grandfather was spending his time studying. He was fortunate enough to have brothers and to have had a father before who made him well enough to do not need to work in order to feed his family. So he was spending most of his time studying, and he had a dual education. He was a rabbi, and at the same time he was, and that is something which is paradoxical and extremely interesting, he was one of the best specialists of Spinoza. So to have a rabbi who is interested in Spinoza, who spent time trying to learn and understand Spinoza, when we know how Spinoza has been treated by the rabbi of his age, at his age, and what they've done to him, is excommunicated. It's something which is quite interesting, and he was trying to understand, to teach me and to tell me how to understand that kind of situation and why he was interested in Spinoza, when normally people of his surrounding were considering that this was asur. It was something not kosher. He should not touch a book of Spinoza. And he was brave enough to be not only a very good rabbi, extremely respected, to the point that today there is in Melilla, because they were living in south of Spain and in the north of Morocco. And in Melilla, there is a museum which is dedicated to my grandfather and his life and what he has achieved, etc. And there are a few things which were absolutely extraordinary. For example, there is something which I remember. There was a big plate at the entrance of his house, and it was a townhouse, so the entrance was open, and there was a kind of, in French we say dessert, okay, let's say, I don't know how to translate it in English. And on that, there was a big plate with plenty of pesetas. And the beggars were coming and taking whatever they wanted. Wow. And one day, I told him, but you know, they can take whatever they want. You should give them what you think is right, instead of this can be unfair, because there are the shy people who take 1 or 2, and there are the daring people who take 10 or 12 or 15. And he said, when you give, you don't show that you are giving. They have to take themselves what they consider the need for themselves. But if you give, you give the feeling that you are giving to them and that they are beggars. So the dignity of the beggar is that you don't show him that he is a beggar. And this has been a big lesson among many others and he was incredibly thoughtful, and he was teaching not only to me but to all his grandchildren the lessons of the life and how we should behave, and what's right, what's wrong, and trying also to teach us a little bit of the Torah, but that was something which was a little bit more difficult. The lesson of life was easier to understand than going through the books.
Well, I'll tell you something. You know, that is remarkable. Certainly in the way to give. You see, Maimonides, obviously, which is the one of the greatest Jewish scholars, obviously born and raised initially in Spain. He talks about the various grades and levels of charity. And that's exactly the point he mentions. He says how to give whilst retaining integrity and the dignity of the individual. It's a very subtle, nuanced difference, but it's a world of difference. It's, you make reference to it, we'll come to it later on, a mentsch. That's what it is. And it's the theory, the Torah is the theory, the practice and the behavior. That's the challenge, how to translate the theory into practice. And it sounds like you had a very special grandfather.
Yeah, but I guess that I don't want to diminish his merits, but I think that the fact that he was taken care of by his family has helped him a great deal. And he always was grateful to his parents and his brothers, that he had not to work and he could spend all his life studying, and that his father has been kind and good enough to accept from him that he would study the religious texts and going through the Torah and all the education of the rabbis, but also to be permitted to learn from the secular world and to have a degree on philosophy and to go to try to understand the great philosophers and to make a connection between what the Torah is saying, what the prophets were saying, and what Socrates or Platon or later on Spinoza were saying. And this is something which was extremely important to him, because he was considering that without contradiction and without understanding the two pieces of the world, he would be a little bit missing something important.
Certainly. It's not just the theory, the Torah, it's practice, and it has to be translated and applied in the real world amongst people who think a certain way. Let's move on a little to, obviously you spent many years and you built up Publicis to the great company that it is today. And obviously you've had a lot of experience. You were blessed to be mentored by those great people you mentioned before. So I'm sure you're, besides being a good mentee, you're also a great mentor. And if I can ask you a few questions about that experience. So, you've achieved a lot of great things in Publicis over the years, many years. What would you say you are most proud of is your, let's say, greatest success?
I think that the most important thing is that I have participated in building one of the greatest company which has been transformed dramatically, moving from roughly 4,000 or 5,000 people to 80,000, being a very good French company with some little outpost in Europe to one of the top players in the world. And all this without losing his soul. And this is something which is extremely important, without sacrificing its values and being always decent, with dignity, treating the people as if we were a SME, a small business. And this was something the respect that we owe to our people and that we are cherishing as a small company. When you know everyone by the first name and you know if he or she is married, if he or she has kids, if there is somebody ill, it's you create a kind, I wouldn't use the word family, but kind of, there is a spirit of family. It's difficult to have that kind of spirit when you are 80,000 and you don't know the people anymore. You are spread in more than 100 countries. You come across people you don't know if they are part of the group or not. You don't know what is their past and what will be their future. And keeping those values as something which is tremendously important. We are pillars. We are the true pillars of the group, which is making that group so different from the others. That is probably the best thing which happened to Publicis. It's relatively easy to grow. It's not so complicated to create a very large company, provided that you have the possibility of doing it. We have done it without infusion of new capital. We have done it only with the hard work, sweat, and fantastic passion and energy. And we transformed a very, very good French operation with a lot of values into a very large corporation of the 21st century with also great values and without sacrificing anything which was important to the founder, with a great loyalty to the founding family, because I think it's important to be respectful to the people who have given you the opportunity of doing something for which they could have said, it's too risky, this is not our story, we don't like it. And instead of that, they have supported all the time, and they have made it possible. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of is clearly that we kept all our values and we made that company unique from the values point of view.
Well, that sounds like a fascinating story. You talk about obviously the values and retaining those values and making sacrifices, and we'll get to that in a second, to retain those values. What if you can just a few minutes just share with us like 3 of the key values?
the most important values that we have is obviously integrity in everything we do. When it comes to not only the way we behave toward our clients, but also toward our suppliers, our employees, the consumers. Respect. Respect is an enormous value in the group. We respect all our people. So long before Black Lives Matter, or long before we are talking about segregation, discrimination, and diversity, and how to respect people for who they are. Whatever is their color of skin, their religion, their sexual orientation, this has been embedded in our group as something, as a key principle. And that is extremely important. We play by the rules, and we don't try to do something which is not right. So it's not only to not doing something which is illegal, but for example, when you see that some companies are having tax shelters in some countries, etc., it's not illegal. It's something which is, in the view of some other countries, not right to do. We never played that game. We considered that, okay, we have to be good citizens of the country we operate, and we have to respect the rules of that country, and to pay our taxes exactly as if we were a company of that country. And we don't want to pay more, but we don't play the game of trying to distract revenues and go in some tax haven countries. We don't like this. We try to be fair in everything we do. Another word for fair is just, and just is in French more important than fair. Être juste, it's something which is critically important. So with this handful of values, you have an idea of what kind of company we want to be, and we try to be every day. And you know, at the time where nobody was speaking about sexual harassment, it happens that they had to fire very important employees simply because they have not behaved correctly with women. Long before we talked about that kind of thing. So it's already in the 80s, we were extremely rigorous. And this doesn't make us a sad company, because it's it's a company where we can have a lot of fun. We are an industry which is changing all the time, which is fantastic for the people, because it is rejuvenating the mind of everyone. It is also something which is in tune with the social changes, and with the art, the politics, the showbiz, the media. So it's at the center of many aspects of what is making the life sometimes a little bit interesting. So despite all those aspects, so not only we have fun, but we are rigorous. So it's complicated sometimes, because it's a little bit contrarian to what ad agencies are known for, but this is the way we operate, and I think those values are extremely important and have played a very important role in building the company we are.
So moving on from there, you know, as you said, it's today, not like before, it's a larger company. You're 3 generations removed from the original founders who built the organization, who felt it, who understood and understood the values. You know, you've got to move on, and you recruit new people, young people who are born in a different generation. And today, Publicis is a big company. How do you help these new hires to quickly get a good understanding of these values?
The first aspect, so we have the classic book, we have the rules. At the beginning, it was a small booklet, very small, and it was called Some Principles and Values. That's it. It was just this. And it was a small booklet, very tiny, and there was a small indication, and this has been written, every single word has been written by myself. It was in the early 90s. Later on, we created a book. We called it Janus because of the 2 faces. The face of joy, pleasure, fun, and the face of rigor. The face of the past, the tradition that you must respect. You have to know where you come from if you want to know where you go to. And that was extremely important. And the face of innovation and future. So all this has been done, but this makes no sense, and it's nothing if it is not accompanied by something which is much more important than any word you write, which is the behavior. You can only lead by example. And people are watching you. They are watching the way you behave. And everyone is watching how are you deciding when there is something important, crucial, which is happening. When a client is abusing some of our people simply because he's behaving nastily, or when there is a huge pressure on the business, what kind of attitude do you have? Or when there is the head of an agency or the head of a department who is not behaving correctly, what are the decisions that you are making and how are you deciding this? And clearly, your acts speak louder than your words. And this is something which I have always applied. Consider that one decision speaks much louder than 1,000 pages.
That's fantastic. Let's move on to some other things in the context of business. And, you know, obviously things don't always go to plan, and it's not good things that happen or successes. Can you talk or share a little about perhaps one of the great failures and what you have learned from it?
I have many failures, but I will speak only about the most recent one, which was the failed merger with a competitor of us that I respect, and still now I continue to respect. But we discovered down the road, and after we signed all the papers, that we didn't put the same thing behind the words. And when we were speaking about equality and a merger of equals, it was not only true on the numbers, it had to be true on other aspects, and we had not exactly the same understanding. So we decided to split, and I think it was a good decision because, again, when you are doing something, you have to be true to what you are doing, and you do not play with the word. You don't say this is a merger of equals, and at the end of the day, it is not. So we decided to take the plug off the merger and to disrupt the process. This has been seen by the French press, and to a lesser extent, but also by the international press, as a failure. The international press was more balanced. It was between a failure of both. The French press was considering that it was much more a failure of Publicis. It's always there is a French sentence which say you cannot be a prophet in your own country, this taught me many things. The first one is that you have to spend much more time when you want to do something of the like, in order to be sure, through not only words, but also examples and detailed demonstration, that you are really agreeing profoundly on the same objectives and the same way of getting there. The second is what a US CEO told me when I called him, and I said, I'm sorry to tell you that unfortunately the merger for which I asked you to approve it is not going to happen. And I explained the situation, and he said to me, bravo Maurice, you're right. I wish I would have done the same when I knew that we were going to collapse. And it happened that many companies in the middle of the process see that the merger will fail, and they have not the courage of making a decision. And I think that the board and everyone has been fantastic by approving to unwind the agreement. And I think that the people have been fantastic to understand it. So it's mixed thing. On the one hand, I should have spent much more time, and I should probably have involved many more people in the process to see if we were really in full agreement. That's one. And second, the other aspect is that when something is going wrong, better to stop it, even if you have to take bad press on the face. And it was really bad press.
No, certainly. Yeah, look, obviously these are moments where you have to have a lot of courage and a lot of wisdom, because it's not about the short term, it's about the long term. You talk a lot about adaptation, and you know, obviously you've been there for many decades and you've seen a lot of change, and obviously there continues to be disruption in the world. How do you deal? What can you tell people, as to young people especially, how to deal with disruption? What we can learn from it?
I think that in our industry, we are better prepared for the change than in many other industries. But clearly, we have conservative people, as in many operations, people who like the tradition, and why making things differently from yesterday. We have been doing this for 10 years, and why suddenly we will change? I think, again, for that kind of changes, the first thing that you have to do is to have a good reading of what will happen. And it happens that, fortunately for us, we have had a quite good reading of what the future will be long before many of our competitors. And we have invested heavily in digital, in technology, in data, when our competitors were still investing in traditional agencies. So you need to have that kind of ability to see behind the hill. And it happens that I was trained and educated in IT before going to advertising, and this has helped me a great deal. And then what you need is to spend time explaining and this stuff, because it's probably the currency which is in scarcity in our industry, as in many. It's very scarce to find time, and but nevertheless, if you want to achieve something, if you want to embark your people, you need to have them following, embracing, and very often moving ahead of you. And the success is really when you have your teams who are ahead of you. This means that, yes, you have achieved something, they have understood, you are with not only the right people, but they are so good that they have understood the disruption, and they have understood that they need to move ahead, and they are moving so fast that they are faster than you. And this is the best achievement when it comes to disruption. But without explanation, if you want to dictate a change, this is not going to happen. A dictatorship is interesting because you don't need to consult anyone. You can make your decision pretty quickly. You impose your point of view and you move on. But that kind of system in a people business is not going to work for very long. It can work for a few years because people trust you, and as soon as you have a problem, they don't follow you anymore, or they leave. And in a business where talent is the essence of the business and the most important asset, it is important that people understand where you go. It's important that they understand the path you are going through, that they not only approve it, but embrace it and promote it and celebrate it. And it's extremely important that they feel part of that changes. So it takes time, it takes a lot of energy to explain, to confront the point of views, because sometimes people do not adhere to what you say. They consider that, okay, you may be wrong, which is unfortunately one of the weaknesses of any human being. And if you feel that you are always right, this is the beginning of the end. So it is critically important that you accept the confrontation, you accept the counter-argumentation, the debate, the discussion, and if you see that you are wrong on something, that you do recognize it, and with humility, you change your plans. I will tell you a story of something regarding disruption. This was after the crisis of the beginning of the 90s and the first Kuwait-Iraqi war, and there has been a collapse of the economy. It was terrible. We lost, or we were about to lose in the first year something like 25% of our revenues. And instead of taking the decision immediately to fire a third or a quarter of the people, what I decided to do is to organize, this was 93, to organize what I have called the Economical Revolution. And during 5 or 6 weeks, every evening there was a kind of happening, and people could join or not. They were free, and there was discussion among the people, and each group had to bring ideas. We came up with, I don't remember, something like 180, which has been reduced to 110 or 12 ideas. And despite this, we were not able to cover the reduction of revenues. And Marcel Blanchet was the chairman of the supervisory board, and he asked me what I planned to do, and I said I will propose that we reduce our compensation and instead of firing people. And he said, Maurice, it's crazy. There is no reason why people will accept to do that. Why don't you do what is reasonable, which is to restructure, is a word which has not been invented by dogs, and you restructure the organization. And unfortunately, you have to do some layoffs, and you do it. I said, yes, this is something that I will keep in last recourse, but I would like to do something of the like. I would like to offer. And I organized a referendum by which there was people at my level, we are reducing by 25%, people below by 15 or 20%, then 10%, 8%, and at the lowest level, they were getting a raise. And we got 96% of approval.
Wow.
And I told them, listen, you will save people, save jobs, but I'm not asking you to do that to save jobs, because if somebody has to take the responsibility of making layoffs, it's me. So if you vote against, you vote against. You don't feel guilty, and don't consider that because you are voting against, you are firing people. You will not. The one who will have to do it, it's me, it's my job, and I will do it. But if I want to do that, it's because we are a different kind of company with a different kind of spirit, where solidarity means something. And hopefully within 2 years, we will go back to your initial salary. And we did it within 1 year.
Wow.
So these explain ways of making disruption differently from others.
Look, Maurice, I must tell you that it's an incredible story. I'm not sure how many people know that story. It's a story that's certainly relevant today in our times. I heard from a friend of mine who works at a big VC company who did something similar. I don't know what the numbers were, but there was across the board, there was variations of reduction. And, you know, I guess it's all about the short term versus the long term. And also the collective versus pure individual. It's a win-win, looking for a win-win scenario. Talking about... Go ahead. Yeah, so moving a little bit out of that particular framework context, in terms of value. So I know and you spoke about it before, your parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, you obviously were dedicated very much to building this huge organization, and obviously its resources and time and effort. How do you manage your work-life balance, and what advice would you give your employees, your children, your grandchildren in overcoming that struggle that a lot of people have?
I will ask them to do not follow my example, because I must say that I have a very bad balance. I work still now long hours. I was this morning at the office, it was, I don't know exactly, but before 6:30. I left, it was past 8. And this is not very unusual. And this is not right. I'm spending too much time at the office, and clearly it is at the expense of my family. It happens that I have a wonderful wife. It happens also that we are married extremely young, and it happens also that we got our sons very early on. And when they grew up, I was available. I could do some schoolwork with them. I could help them, and I have been very present. And then down the road, progressively, I have been much less present. And particularly since the mid-90s, but they were already grown up, where I had to travel like hell to build this group, to go in all the countries, to try to acquire agencies or to build agencies, to recruit people, to change people, to go to clients. And I have been enormously absent, which is not a good thing when you look at. So if I take the whole life, I have no regret, because I have dedicated plenty of my time to my sons and my wife in the early days. But after, I must say that I'm compensating, and this is a good thing, by the intensity when I'm there. When I'm present, I'm present. But it's not a good example that I'm giving. And if I have a good advice, I think a better balance is necessary. And I would suggest that, yes, it's important to work hard. It is important to dedicate passion to the work. And people feel the passion. When you are doing a job just because it is a job which helps you feeding your family, people see it, and then the results are not there. But when you are putting much more than your time, you are putting energy, you are putting passion, that at the end of the day, you get the result which are in line with the passion that you have put. This extra mile is extremely important. It is something which is helping you to stand above the others. It is something which is helping you, including in the eyes of the client, of the colleagues, of the market. They feel the passion. This is something that people feel. When you are not passionate, when you are just doing a job like a bureaucrat, at the end of the day, you get the result that you deserve. So this being said, you have to commensurate the time, the dedication, and the passion with the other part of your life, which is extremely important, which is your family, and you have to be a good family man, to spend time with your family, to spend time with the kids, with your wife. Otherwise, you pay at the end of the day the price. In my industry, it's quite common to have divorces and people who pass from one wife to another wife, and maybe sometimes a third one, even a fourth one. I have only one. And it's a pillar of my life. So it's something which is extremely important.
Fantastic. As you said, it's the passion and the quality of time that is most important. You mentioned before in the context of publicists that it's if you want to know where you're going, you have to know where you come from. You also spoke about your grandfather and what you learned from him. So, as a Jew, what do you think are the core Jewish values?
First, before answering the question, I would like to say that I'm trying to run the company without any interference with my faith. I consider, obviously I'm a Jew and I cannot change what I am, but I have always considered that my faith is a private aspect of my life. I'm fortunate to have a name which is not ambiguous. So only for people who really have never heard of what Lèvy means, it's clear that I'm a Jew, and it is helping, particularly when there is some anti-Semitic person in the room. But I have always tried to do not make any interference of any kind with my religion or my origin or whatever. I consider that this should not interact with the way I'm running the business, the company. Now, what are in my views, the values of a Jew? First, I don't know. I will tell you what I consider it is for me, and I'm not sure I'm right, but there are a few things which I consider are part of my Jewish education. Let's put it that way. First, there is this idea of the past, the tradition, and the future. As I said, and I believe that is true in the Jewish religion, you have to know where you come from if you want to know where you go. And I think that recognizing your roots, having a profound respect and loyalty to the tradition and the family is something which is, I consider, I may be wrong, but it's a core value to the Jews. at least to a Jewish family as I have been living in and educated. There is something which was considered by Shimon Peres as a great quality and a great virtue, and they considered, we were in agreement because we are always very often speaking. And he was one day saying that one of the greatest quality of the Jews is to do not be easily satisfied. So I wanted to know exactly what he wanted to say, and because you can take it two ways. You can say, okay, I'm not satisfied because I'm always angry, I'm always upset or whatever. No. It's because you are demanding of yourself. You cannot be satisfied of what you are doing because you want to do even better, even more, and whatever you are doing, you try to improve. And he said, this is something which I have observed as, and he told me this very late on. He was president of the State of Israel. And he said, this is one of the observations that they have had, is this feeling of being always demanding of yourself. You cannot ask from others what you don't deliver yourself. You cannot be satisfied with what you are doing because you need to prove more. And something that I have experienced when I was a very young student at school and primary and the need to be better, the need to really do more, the need to deliver more, to be a better student. It's maybe ridiculous. I don't know, because when I'm looking back and looking at all those efforts, why for? Why so much? But it is something which I felt that if I wanted, because I was a Jew, to be accepted, I had to do more than what I owed. I don't know if I'm clear.
Yeah, no, right.
So these, and there is also something which is extremely important, which is loyalty, solidarity, a feeling of sharing also. These are part of the value. The tzedakah is part of one of, if it's not a commandment, it is almost a commandment. So tzedakah is something which is important. It shows the solidarity toward the community and the sharing also. You need to share. This is something that we have been taught very early on. And this is something that I have always seen in my family and always seen also with friends. The idea of sharing. There was an expression, a French one, so you will ask your wife, she will translate it to you. It was the open house for Pesach and for some events, some family events. And there was that expression which was, Quand il y en a pour 3, il y en a pour 4. When there is for 3, there is for 4. When there is for 5, there is for 6. So please come in. And this is something which is very Jewish, but maybe it is also in other religions. So they should forgive me if I don't know. But I consider that this is something that is something that we learn very early on. I remember with my grandfather, the house was open. Every Shabbat dinner, there was an empty seat if someone was coming. And that was something which, because I was spending my summer vacation with my grandfather, and this was something that I have always seen. All the Shabbos, there was that empty seat.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. By the way, tzedakah, you mentioned tzedakah before, not only is it a mitzvah, it is considered the greatest mitzvah. So in the Jerusalem Talmud, whenever it says the word mitzvah without a description, we are told it refers to tzedakah, because in a way it sums up, as you say, a core value, which is what all mitzvot is about. It's about sharing. Let me just ask you a couple of more questions, and then we've got to go because it's late, especially for you in Paris, where it's an hour ahead. I sat, as I mentioned before, with Chemi Peres, so Mr. Shimon Peres' son, in Davos for a Shabbat dinner. And we were talking exactly about this point, about how the Jew is never satisfied, he's always driving himself, doing more, doing the best, etc. And he seemed to suggest a connection between that, because the question is why? Where does that come from? Why are we so driven? And he seemed to suggest, there's a famous song by Arik Einstein, one of the great Israeli singers. And in Hebrew, it's Ani ve'ata neshaneh et ha'olam, which means to say, me and you are going to change the world. Somehow with Jews, especially, we're not content with just, getting on, doing a nice job and getting away with it. We want to change things. We want to make things better. We want to improve. What's your take on that? You want to make the world a better place.
This is a bit immodest. Tikkun olam. Can we repair the world in order that it can be better? Tikkun olam is something which is extremely important with the Jews, but to consider that my actions can make the world a bit better is really a little bit presumptuous, and I would not dare to think that high. I consider that if only I can be a decent man and having a decent family and playing my role within my community decently, it would be fine. It would be just fine.
Well, Maurice, if I can say this, because you're older than me and you have certainly more wisdom with regard to experience, but your act in the early 90s of retaining so many of your employees and showing that loyalty to them in an amazing way must have impacted the lives of hundreds, thousands of employees in ways that, in a positive way, in ways that are maybe unimaginable in terms of the long term. So that is a tremendous, I would say, most people would say, act of sacrifice on your behalf in the short term to help people. It's an extraordinary value, as you say, and with the name Levy, it certainly gives the Jewish people who watching Publicis, because it's not just Jewish, but none in the world, watching how Publicis run and inspired by Jewish people and instilling those values, a tremendous good name. So I think there are certainly ways where people can have huge positive impact on the lives of people. Whereas I've just got a couple more questions and then we go.
Yes, just before you go to the question, I would like to insist on the fact that the company by itself is an agnostic company, and a company cannot have a religion, and whatever is the religion, the faith, or the beliefs of the CEO, the chairman, the founder, the company by itself has to be extremely open and respectful to all religions, all people, without any difference, and respect all differences. And that's the reason why our mantra has been for years, Viva la différence.
No, I understand. Let's just a couple more questions. Obviously, during this period, this strange world in which we find ourselves with the COVID-19, this pandemic that has disrupted the world in a spectacular way, what lessons have you learned from this pandemic, and what good things do you think might come out of it?
If you go back to 2019, we were entering in 2020 in good health. The economy was fantastic. Macron was having a few problems, but not so many. You had Trump was believing that he would be re-elected easily, and the opposition was thinking the same, that it was almost a done deal. And the economy was creating jobs all around the world. And suddenly, you have a very small virus who put all those plans, boom, boom, vanished. And that small virus has changed a lot of things and has led people thinking differently about their health. Suddenly, health has become the first most important thing in the life of everyone, including the responsibility of the states. You have Boris Johnson was joking about the virus until he has been himself contaminated, infected, but Macron was declaring the war to the virus. Trump was hesitating, and at the end of the day, you have seen last week, he was wearing a mask. Even Bolsonaro has worn a mask. And you have the people who have been forced to be contained, lockdowns, all the offices, the people discovering the possibility of working from home, stores were shut down, etc., etc. So all this is telling you that we live in a fragile world. And there is nothing which is given for the life. You have to earn it every single day. And everyone was believing that, okay, life was already planned, and there will be 2 or 3 more years of huge growth. And suddenly, it's not happening. And suddenly, there are people who are in the streets. who have been laid off, and there are a lot of problems. So the idea that things are given is something that we should revisit. Things are earned every day, and it's tough. The second aspect is that things are extremely fragile. Economy is fragile, politics is fragile, security is fragile, health is fragile. And this means also that you have to take an enormous care of your health and protecting your family. And the notion of protection and care were really remote and very low in the priority of the people, have become top priorities. And this shows that it suffices, that a small thing can change your life and sometimes suppress it.
Thank you. Just one final question. In a Financial Times interview some years ago, they asked you a question. The question was, how do you want to be remembered? And you said you haven't really thought about that. Maybe that was back then. But anyway, you said that in Yiddish, there is a word called mentsch. It means mensch. That's how you want to be remembered. What is your definition, if I may ask? What's your definition? A concise, short definition of the word mensch.
And this is a trap because I'm a Sephardi.
I know. I was. Maurice, it's probably the only time the word mensch was mentioned in the Financial Times. And it was said by a Sephardi. Because Ashkenazi maybe was too embarrassed to use a Jewish word.
No, they have not been embarrassed when they just asked how to write it, how to spell it.
I think it's right.
You know, I have a very clear definition of what a mensch is. A mensch is a decent person when looking at the eve of his life and looking back. There are very few things he can be ashamed of, and certainly not having done deliberately harm to somebody else. And this will be enough for me. I'm not asking for more.
I can see you have learned well from your grandfather and from all your other mentors. Maurice, I want to thank you very, very much for spending the time, your valuable time, certainly from someone who works so hard, early in the morning until late at night. And
this is because I'm not good enough. If I was very good, I should have spent less time.
Yeah, but Maurice, you're being very humble. I must say, your grandfather came across as someone very, very special, and all the other people, you were privileged.
He was. He was special.
Yeah, and you can see. You know, I met someone years ago, an Israeli, secular Israeli, and he turns to me and he says, Rabbi, he says, you know, I don't even know if I believe in God, but to me, the Jewish religion means one thing. And that is, before I make any big decision in my life, I ask myself one question. And that is, will this make my grandfather smile? And I'll tell you something, I think I have never heard a better definition of what...
Of the grandfather. But it's funny enough because, and this will be maybe the last word of the interview. But recently, I have seen a documentary about a Jewish family, and the guy was always referring to the grandfather. And I have said to myself, gosh, if I was the father, I would be really embarrassed to see that I need to wait for my grandchildren in order to be respected by the family. But it's something which is quite common. And I know a lot of people who are saying, yes, my grandfather has been extremely important to me. So it's something which shows that there is a continuity. It's not only the nucleus of the family, the father, the mother, and the kids, it is a continuum. And I like the idea of continuity. And by the way, if there is something which is common to the Jewish people, it's probably the continuity since slightly more than 5,700 years.
Well, you got it. Well, the numbers are right. Maurice, thank you so much. Deeply appreciated. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did too. I just want to announce that we have a few other events coming up in the next couple of weeks. We have an event on relationships called Is Marriage Outdated with the founder of JSwipe and a spiritual guru in the States called Maurice Friedman. We also have a leadership series with incredible presenters, Francois Pinard, the captain of the South African rugby team, and Eliezer Shkedi, former head of the Israeli Air Force. So lots of events coming up. And again, we hope you enjoyed this evening tonight. We thank you very much, Maurice, for joining us. We wish you lots of health, most importantly for you and your family. And as we say, nachas, happiness from your children and grandchildren. And they should have a lot of nachas from you too. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful
Thank you. Thank you.